On December 12, 2024, on a beautiful morning in the heart of downtown, a dramatic incident occurred that sent shockwaves through the entire neighborhood. The police were on their routine bicycle patrol, an eco-friendly, seemingly cool mode of transport beloved by sports enthusiasts. However, just as they were cycling serenely, they suddenly received a call from a Lyft driver, an unexpected situation that neither the driver nor the officers could have ever imagined would happen on a regular day. The driver, in a panic, informed the police that a woman had mischievously removed the wiper from the back of his car. Although the damage was minimal, the wiper was only slightly damaged. It was enough to prevent the car from continuing its trips and, of course, to raise the attention of the police. Without hesitation, the officers, responsible for maintaining public order and perhaps hoping for a normal patrol day without strange situations, rushed to the scene. Surely, in their minds, they weren't just asking, "What's going on here?" but also, "Does our bike patrol really lead to situations like this?" Upon arrival, they discovered two women exhibiting behavior that seemed quite suspicious. However, this still wasn't enough to spark the dramatic explosion they were expecting. Then, the officers not only caught one of them in the act of vandalizing property but also discovered a fresh detail. The two women were attempting to remove a public sign, a completely illegal, yet oddly creative action, given that the signs had done nothing wrong, other than standing harmlessly for who knows how long. This moment truly set the stage for a perfect black comedy scenario, where the combination of vandalism and the confusion of both suspects created an unforgettable picture. The police were faced with an absurd and ridiculous situation to such an extent that, without a touch of humor, they might have gone mad. Furthermore, not every patrol shift involves such scenes, and certainly not when you're riding a bike. On a regular day for the officers, enjoying the freedom of nature through their bike patrols. Yes, you heard that right, bikes. A call came in, interrupting their seemingly endless peace. This call wasn't from a daring robbery or a serious case, but from a Lyft driver who seemed to be having a day that wasn't his. In a notably frantic voice, he reported that a woman had removed the wiper from his car, causing a small scratch on his perfect vehicle. Yes, you read that right, a small scratch, not a catastrophic crash or a high-speed chase, just a tiny scratch, but enough for the driver to feel as though his world was falling apart. Although this incident seemed trivial, it appears that nothing is small when it comes to those who protect justice. The police, with their sacred bikes and strong spirits, immediately leaped into action. They were not just officers in uniforms. They were bike warriors, with steady hands on the handlebars and unshakable determination, ready to face any situation, even if it was just a wiper vandalism. Without a second thought, the officers charged into the investigation, not with heavy-duty patrol cars but with promising green bikes to protect the planet. They weren't confused at all. Instead, they were confident with the motto, "We protect justice, even when it requires pedaling to do so." Then, they found the two women behaving in a highly suspicious manner.
Why?
Because only suspects would casually remove a public sign without considering the consequences. That's right, not a car vandal or a criminal gang snatching chains, but rather two seemingly innocent women removing signs. The police didn't need to investigate further. The situation was clear, a public order violation, and action had to be taken. Although this seemed like an overly absurd situation, it was the perfect moment for the officers to show their skills, not in solving a major case but in handling the ridiculous situations that life sometimes presents. But wait, this story couldn't just end with a wiper vandalism. No, the situation was turning into a national-level public order disruption. As the police got closer, they caught the two suspects in the act of taking it upon themselves to rebuild societal order in a very unique way, by attempting to remove a public sign. Yes, a public sign, which most of us see as a lifeless object. But to them, it was a toy they could take without asking anyone. This could be an unexpected career change, from anonymous vandals to national sign thieves. An act that was totally unforgivable, right? And let's not forget, when the police approached to clarify the situation, no one, absolutely no one, could have predicted that this would be the beginning of an intense, suspenseful investigation. Are we dealing with two sophisticated vandals, street art terrorists with a bold plan, or just two women who accidentally stumbled into an uncalculated game, not knowing that removing signs could become a serious antisocial act? This incident has now turned into something much more than a simple wiper incident. It was a storm, keeping everyone glued to the screen to see what happens next. The police and the Lyft driver, two main characters of the story, have seamlessly come together to kickstart an investigation full of suspense. Unexpected situations kept unfolding, every second like actors in a never-ending play. Everyone knew that nothing was certain when facing these suspects. Will the public sign be returned to its place, or will it become a memento of vandalism? And the wiper, will it be reattached to the driver's car with that tiny scratch? Of course, the answer can only be revealed when the investigation concludes, but one thing is certain: this incident can never end peacefully. At least not until the police retrieve the sign and the mysteriously missing wiper. In this story, it's impossible not to mention the two main characters, the two women, but especially one of them, who was so drunk she couldn't tell reality from a dream, and her actions were nothing short of an action movie scene. In reality, in this state, she could be the protagonist in a comedy about drunk people trying to destroy everything in sight. Together with her companion, she was not just a vandal of property but also trying out a unique art form, removing public signs. If there were an award for this sport, they would be the top contenders, because there's nothing better than creating chaos right in the city center, with signs dangling from their hands and car wipers smashed underfoot. And the police. They certainly couldn't have imagined they would face such a funny situation. When the officers swooped in on their bikes, they were probably thinking this would be a normal patrol day, but life always has a way of surprising you. Who knew that after a call from a Lyft driver, they would be caught up in a sign chase Hollywood style? Heart-pounding action scenes, mind-bending battles, all part of the police patrol and vandalism program. The Lyft driver, who just wanted to make a little extra money and probably never thought he would become the hero in an action movie, unknowingly stepped into the story. That's right, he wasn't just a driver anymore. He was an unofficial whistleblower, an unsung hero. When he decided not to hesitate and report the vandalism, he became a companion to the police, providing key details and helping them trace the suspects. He must have felt like an actor in a thrilling action movie, when in reality, he was just a driver on duty. The next Lyft calls will certainly never be the same. For the police, everything that seemed like it would be smooth sailing quickly turned into a party filled with tension and drama. The officers had to deal with not only property vandalism but also with uncooperative attitudes. And I'm not talking about just the usual non-cooperation, but rather the create chaos to make the investigation more complicated kind, as if the suspects were competing in a contest to make the investigation as tricky as possible. It was truly a juggling act between the police and the suspects, where every gesture, even the slightest move, could lead to a tension-filled moment like in those famous action movies. And so, from an incident that seemed like a minor property damage case, everything became as tense as possible. The police were no longer just patrol officers. They were now engaged in a psychological and strategic battle where every question, even a simple inquiry about a broken wiper or asking for identification, could change the course of events. Every action, every move was calculated carefully, and sometimes it could be a hard punch to logic when the suspect remained stubborn. The police weren't just dealing with a legal mess. They were up against a situation that could easily turn into an action movie. Every detail, no matter how small, like one suspect suddenly pulling out a purse and starting to attack, or a light knee bump, could change the entire script. In the end, when people think about police officers on bike patrol, they imagine a peaceful, neat picture with a few steps on the street. But in reality, that day, they had a pedal-and-handle situation just like an action movie, where the police weren't just on duty but were superheroes facing the most absurd scenarios. In the early stages of the investigation, the Lyft driver, with the sense of responsibility of an ideal citizen, and maybe a little over the top, but who doesn't love their car, immediately called the police to report a serious incident. One of the women, according to him, had ruthlessly and without hesitation destroyed the wiper on his car. Although it was only a small scratch, in the driver's mind, The car wasn't just a means of transport but a second home, his pride, more precious than his pillow. So, the wiper incident, although seeming trivial, became an unforgivable crime. It's no surprise that he saw this as a major felony, as if his car had been attacked by an international criminal organization. With this hot tip, the police officers, with their noble mission and unwavering work ethic, sprang into action at the speed of a highly trained special forces team. There was no hesitation. They rushed to the scene like superheroes in an action movie, with dramatic background music, even though they were just riding bikes. When they arrived and began the investigation, everything seemed to be running smoothly, as if the officers were soon to receive praise for their quick and effective response. But then, like a twist in a thriller, things started to change when one of the women, with the demeanor of someone just out of a super loco action movie, refused to cooperate and started displaying disturbing, even highly questionable behaviors. And the best part? While the police were busy managing the chaos surrounding these women, the Lyft driver and his wiper-related crisis turned into a footnote in the investigation. It was a wild and unpredictable experience. What a day! The story she presented is not only unbelievable but also hard to find words to describe its oddness. Instead of offering apologies or reasonable explanations for her behavior, she began recounting a parallel universe where the windshield wiper was called the tool of the past, and that any intervention with it was just a small act in a larger strategy to protect the balance of the world, or at least her own world. The police, who were prepared for every scenario, now felt like they had stepped into an adventure game, where each step led to an unsolvable puzzle. Although the absurdity of her story was clear, the officers maintained a serious attitude and continued to investigate, not getting swept up in this dramatic yet humorous conversation. What began as a minor issue with the windshield wiper gradually turned into a more bizarre situation than ever before. The police, who thought they were carrying out a routine patrol, now found themselves facing a case more like a battle of wits, where every detail could be an important clue leading to the truth, or at least to an unexpected story. Questioned about her actions, one of the two women, who seemed to have just stepped out of an innocent character film, firmly denied all accusations and insisted on her innocence. She claimed to have no connection to the incident, with an innocent expression that, if there were a title for Queen of Innocence, she would undoubtedly win. She even spoke with confidence and a serene expression, as if just finishing a cozy tea party in a peaceful village, where there was nothing but flowers and happy stories. Who would have thought that this was part of a serious case of public property vandalism, one that could make famous detective films bow down? However, the officers, who had dealt with thousands of different situations, were not easily fooled by such an innocent performance. With the keen eyes and professionalism of experienced officers, they quickly realized that her outfit matched the detailed description the Lyft driver had provided earlier. It was clear that this was a slap in the face from reality, making her testimony appear empty and absurd to the point that it seemed like it was missing the laughter track of an audience. She had tried to outdo herself with her persuasion skills, but unfortunately, this time, the police were not the audience she could easily fool. With this new information, the officer's suspicions not only arose but grew stronger, like a fire spreading in a foggy night. A simple question, the first question in the investigation, opened up a vast universe of doubt. Is this just a coincidence or a meticulously planned act of vandalism? And while everything remained unclear, the truth still hid somewhere, waiting to be uncovered. For the officers, this situation was not just a simple case, but like a bizarre puzzle, where each new piece forced them to dig deeper to solve the story. They understood that this investigation would not be as simple as a straightforward problem to solve, but perhaps a journey full of drama and surprises. Conflict escalated rapidly when the officers requested the two women to present identification, an entirely reasonable request that anyone would think was obvious, something every citizen should comply with. But no, not everyone understood what cooperation meant. One of them, with an attitude seemingly ripped from an intense action movie, flatly refused, as if showing her ID was an incredibly complex challenge, like asking her to compete in an international intellectual contest. She probably thought presenting her ID was a dangerous mission, one that could make her face some evil force. Not stopping there, she decided not only to refuse cooperation but to challenge the entire world, as if standing in an arena where she was the queen of a chaotic kingdom. And so, with a graceful escape move, she decided to flee, but don't think she walked away casually like during a normal stroll. No, she moved as if she were in a marathon race, her legs swift, her movements skillful, and her eyes determined, as if the world was a racetrack and she was striving to win the prestigious gold medal. However, to the officers' eyes, this was the hardest escape they had ever faced in their careers. They didn't need to chase her like in a Hollywood action film, because after all, there's nothing more thrilling than a woman performing an escape right in the middle of a crowded street, where each step was a stressful challenge. This scene resembled a tense chase, where one didn't just run but had to fight with confusion and unexpected elements. The police, in their role as the main characters in this film, had no choice but to follow and maintain order, because if they didn't act immediately, the whole film would likely end in an undesired way. Of course, the officers were not easy to deceive. They quickly stopped her, but little did they know that her resistance was so powerful that it challenged both heaven and earth. A battle was not just taking place between a person and the law, but also between reason and stubbornness, just like a fight in an action movie, but this time without high-speed chases or spinning punches like in the famous Hollywood films. Instead, her weapon of choice was her handbag, which she had likely practiced with, preparing for this exact situation. And then, as if receiving a summons from a martial arts master in a kung fu film, she launched a direct blow to the officer's face, making the tense atmosphere become exhausting. Her punches seemed to have been honed over thousands of years of battle, causing the entire scene to enter a dramatic phase, while the officers, though prepared to deal with it, still felt like they were facing an incredibly harsh challenge. Not stopping there, she continued to display her fighting skills in a way that couldn't have been more refined, using her knee, not in a romantic movie scene, but in an extremely tense situation. And indeed, if she weren't the suspect in this case, the officers might have been impressed by her unique fighting technique. But no, this was a completely different situation, where these martial arts moves had no place in a real confrontation with the police. In fact, they only made the atmosphere even more tense, tightening like a violin string. Faced with such aggression, the officers were forced to take stronger action, because at this point, it wasn't just a simple arrest anymore, but a real battle to maintain order. Arresting her was the only choice to preserve discipline and prevent the situation from escalating, because if they didn't act immediately, no one knew where this could lead. It felt like they were handling a case involving a woman who had crossed the line in displaying her determination, and of course, a bit of absurdity. No one would have expected a property vandalism case to turn into a tense battle of wits with a character who seemed to have lost all reason in a moment of uncontrolled madness. This situation was truly a lesson on always being prepared to face the unexpected, especially when you can't predict what will turn accidental situations into grand battles like in action films. When arrested, the woman didn't just become a suspect, she became a star in her self-written action film, with a performance no one could forget. Instead of remaining silent and accepting her fate like any other arrested person, she began to show an agitation so intense that no one could imagine. She wasn't just caught up in the situation. She created for herself the leading role in a super-dramatic script, and naturally, she became the center of the entire event. Each of her steps in this situation felt like a scene from an action movie, where every detail was exaggerated to the point of disbelief. Armed with a fierce spirit of defiance, she loudly denied all the accusations, as if standing before a jury in a tense verbal battle, not officers simply doing their job. Every explanation she gave seemed designed not just to justify her actions, but to draw attention and confuse the police. But instead of using sharp words or logical arguments like in a heated debate, she chose to use schoolyard insults, sarcastic remarks, and criticisms as if she were in an endless verbal duel with the officers, who were certainly not her opponents in this war of words. These words, instead of helping her defend her actions, only made the atmosphere even more intense. Every sentence, every word thrown out felt like a bomb, making the air not only tense but adding complexity to the situation. This wasn't just a criminal act, but a battle between reason and emotion, an internal struggle no one could predict the outcome of. The officers, instead of dealing with a simple arrest, were caught up in a fiery battle of wits, where there was no concept of right or wrong, only the stubbornness and obstinacy of a woman trying to turn the tables. The police, instead of being mere enforcers of justice, now had to face a female warrior in the real world, someone not just rebellious but incredibly creative in causing trouble. Even though she was in a difficult situation and could not escape the consequences, she seemed to view everything as a stage to express her dissatisfaction with everything happening around her. And this, of course, made the situation even more dramatic than ever before, as everything could become a battle in her own action movie. It felt as though the police were dealing with the protagonist of a story where no one knew the ending, but it certainly wouldn't be an easy one. As she continued to fight with the power of defiance, the officers, like professional diplomats, tried to maintain calm faces, as if they were participating in an important diplomatic meeting rather than a tense arrest. They kept a composed demeanor, seemingly ready to handle any crisis situation, even if that situation felt like an endless psychological war with no resolution. Every one of her objections felt like a bullet fired, and every reply from the officers felt like a thick cloth being wrung out to shield them, but her skill in testing everyone's limits forced them to tap into every ounce of their patience. She wasn't just arguing, she was turning every question from the police into a mental battle, making the officers feel as if they were participating in a complex game of wits with an unpredictable outcome. A few minutes ago, they thought they were handling a simple case, but now, everything had turned into an intellectual challenge where every small mistake could complicate the entire matter. Her words, like cards in a tense poker game, were played with the sole purpose of distracting and putting the officers on the brink of losing their patience. Although everything was as tense as a violin string that could snap at any moment, the officers maintained their perseverance, not because they weren't feeling the pressure, but because they had been trained to stay calm in the most difficult situations. They were like boxers in a psychological match, where there were no physical punches, but each word and reaction was as powerful as an invisible blow. These people couldn't let anger, frustration, or surprise control their actions, because if they did, they would lose control and fall into the trap she had so cleverly set. And while she continues to play the role of an artist in an endless play, the officers can't help but feel like they are in the middle of an intense mind game, with no way of knowing when it will end. Each passing second forces them to learn more patience, like Go players who always think ahead before each move and wait for the right moment, even though the time may drag on to an unbearable length. But they keep their focus on the task, knowing that their patience will decide the final outcome, and in this game, the one who holds out longer will be the winner. Finally, after a series of tense acts and stubborn resistance, when they couldn't calm the suspect's fury, the officers had to resort to strong measures, handcuffing both suspects. This was not a simple act but a sophisticated strategy, like making a move in a calculated game of Go. Perhaps, at that moment, both the officers and the two women felt like they were part of a play, but one without a clear script and full of unpredictable twists. The two women, who had been playing the role of artists in their defiant performance, now had to join the next chapter of the play, the journey from the theater to the police station. Meanwhile, the officers, with the patience and determination of winners in a long contest, continued escorting these uncooperative artists, undeterred by any challenges. The scene was like an action movie, where instead of retreating into the shadows, the suspects were caught under the spotlight, ready to continue the investigation with unsolved questions. What's remarkable is that, for the officers, this was not an easy task. They weren't simply dealing with a case of property damage, but a long psychological battle where things don't always go as planned. But no one could doubt that their mission, though perhaps a bit overdramatic, still had to be carried out seriously. Because, whether it's a humorous script or an intense action scene, the ultimate goal for the officers remains order and safety. The image of the two suspects handcuffed, walking with victorious expressions despite having nothing to be proud of, is also a reminder that in this world, every action has consequences, and sometimes what seems like a minor situation can turn into a heavy drama. But, in the end, the officers had done their duty, facing the warrior women and that dramatic journey, while the public was protected under the shadow of the law, though this story may continue with even more intense scenes. After arresting the suspects, the officers, with serious expressions like heroes who have completed a dangerous mission in a famous action film, returned to meet the Lyft driver, as if they had just walked out of an uncompromising battle and now peace was beginning. But no, they knew the journey to resolve the issue wasn't over, and they still had a long way to go. The Lyft driver, who had just experienced an emotional shock as the key witness in a tense property damage case, could now feel like he had just escaped a dark comedy, providing all the information the police needed, from the broken wiper to the minor damage that still sparked public outcry. Surely, when the Lyft driver looked at the broken wiper, he might have thought it was an unacceptable disaster. A damage so great, it felt like his car had just been thrown into a dream race. However, instead of waving a white flag and asking the police to give up, the driver decided not to pursue the case further because of the small and insignificant damage. This was quite an optimistic and humorous decision, like someone brushing off a small scratch on their luxury car after a rough race. In this situation, he showed a truly brave spirit, willing to overlook material damage to continue living happily. In the eyes of the officers, this was certainly the most optimistic decision possible. They couldn't help but feel the driver was in the most humorous consumer of the year state, making a decision that, if it were in a film, would surely feature the main character raising his hand to the sky and saying, "Well, let it be, it's not worth making a big deal out of." The police could breathe a sigh of relief, as the case hadn't gone too far. Despite a bit of tension and some dramatic action, everything had been resolved smoothly, just like when you decline an invitation for tea after a tiring battle. This shows that sometimes, in life, situations that seem tense can be resolved easily, like deciding to ignore a small scratch on your luxury car. After a series of tense dramas and spectacular action scenes, the police could finally return to their work, while the Lyft driver likely felt like he had just walked out of an action movie, even though his car was just slightly scratched. Although the decision not to prosecute was made, the Lyft driver's cooperation was still a key factor in this bizarre case. He wasn't just a mere witness, but an invisible assistant, always standing by, ready to provide detailed information about the car's condition without drawing attention. Like a silent ghost, the driver played a crucial role in completing the police report. He wasn't flashy, but he didn't miss any details. In fact, this driver might never be remembered in family stories, when people gather and share happy memories. But, in the small world of investigations, he was an irreplaceable character, like a foundation stone in a grand architectural structure, unnoticed, yet essential for maintaining stability. The driver, who might have thought his workday was just about regular rides, suddenly became part of a strange story where his car became the center of an investigation, and he himself was the key to helping the police maintain order and discipline, though that order was related to a small broken wiper. Although there were no calls for justice, no applause like the dramatic scenes in action films, at least for this driver, the case had been resolved satisfactorily, like completing a mission that wasn't too thrilling but still full of responsibility. And perhaps, after all, he was ready for his next trip, where there were no strange public signs or broken wipers. His next ride would return to normal customers, simple conversations, and his beloved car would go back to its daily work, a life without the chaos of strange cases, nor art destroyers trying to remove signs or wipers. But in any case, in a world where everything can become part of an investigation, this Lyft driver left his mark, a light yet certainly unforgettable one. The final result of the case, like an unpredictable action movie, was undoubtedly a dramatic work with scenes that were both intense and absurdly funny. The two women were not only caught in a whirlwind of events but also played the main role in a memorable performance of defiance against law enforcement. As a result, they were honored with serious charges, like assaulting an officer, resisting law enforcement, and destroying public property. Imagine them as two stars in an action film, where every scene was full of unexpected twists and exciting stunts. One of the women, so drunk that it was clear she didn't realize she was causing chaos, didn't make things any easier. On the contrary, she was charged with public intoxication, not just because of one too many drinks, but because she created an unpleasant drunken atmosphere, making the officers feel like they were at an outdoor beer festival. In fact, she didn't just wander into a storm of alcohol, She turned everything into a humorous disaster, with unpredictable actions that forced the officers to work harder to handle the situation. This wasn't a common crisis, but a series of consecutive events, with each step taken by the female suspects making the situation more dramatic and unpredictable. They were not only fighting the police but also creating their own record, something unlike any other in the history of criminal cases. In a humorous and somewhat sarcastic way, we could say these two women had achieved things no one would want to accomplish, and they would definitely become legends in the books about unusual suspects. The investigation scenes not only contained tense and complicated situations, but also had unbelievable funny moments when the ridiculous behavior of these two suspects pushed the story further, creating a sense like the police were filming a comedy action movie. The unforgettable records set by these two women will certainly not be displayed in any honor exhibition, but at least in professional history, they will always be remembered as special characters with the most incredible resistance acts. With accusations piling up like a legal castle being built brick by brick, the two suspects now had to wait for their trial to see where their artistic performances would take them in the legal books. They might become stars remembered forever in legal casebooks, but not in the way they probably expected. Could their artistic reactions, seen as resistance performances in an action movie, with handbags as secret weapons and knees as tools for defiance, make the sentences harsher? Surely. With each defiant act, not only did the legal situation become more complex, but anyone who witnessed the events couldn't help but put on a humorous mask and couldn't stop squirming. While the charges have yet to be officially confirmed, we can all imagine that this trial will be like a dramatic soap opera. And not just because of the wrongdoings of the two suspects, but also because of their shocking performance throughout the process. Their inexplicable resistance created humorous shades, turning a tense case into an artwork that left the witnesses laughing. It's hard to know who was more tested, the police officers, facing relentless resistance, or the two women, who kept complicating the situation and causing laughter. While the case is still being handled according to legal procedures, we can't help but imagine the future of these two women. Will they become stars in the worst incidents news, where everyone will shake their heads and wonder, how could they think of handling things this way? Or will they simply be part of a larger lesson about never mixing alcohol with defiance of law enforcement? Whatever the outcome, one thing is certain: they've left an indelible mark in the legal community, as well as in the minds of those who witnessed this one-of-a-kind performance. Their image won't just be seen as that of mere suspects in the eyes of the public, but as characters sarcastically referenced in legal stories, those who turned what seemed like a simple case into an action comedy artwork, blending drama, tension, and absurdity in a strange way. The message this case sends is as clear as a road sign that can't be missed. Destructive behavior and defiance of the law are no joke, especially when you think you can get away with it just because you're hot-headed or drunk. The police did not let the little chaos created by these two women slide. Though at first, it may have seemed like they were acting in a playful way, the truth is that, in the end, the law had the final say, as it should. The case was left as a small-scale yet intense comedy, with a little chaos, but a solid legal lesson. If you get involved in action movies, don't expect the script to always end in your favor. The real heroes in this play were the officers, who bore the brunt of the chaos without losing their focus. Though they were constantly challenged, their performance turned out to be more dignified than a hero's winning act in a classic action movie. This story, once considered a comedy, will remain in history as an interesting reflection on law enforcement's efforts to deal with an unexpected situation of defiance. The social message conveyed by this story couldn't be clearer. Never underestimate the consequences of excessive alcohol consumption. It seems that in this story, these two women really elevated the concept of being drunk to an art form. When losing control not only affects personal health but also leads to bizarre actions that can be harmful not only to themselves but to the community as well. Who would have thought that a little alcohol and a lack of self-control could turn ordinary citizens into performance artists, causing chaos in broad daylight? In fact, from another perspective, this could be an interesting event, but in terms of seriousness, it is clearly a lesson about responsible drinking. Because when you can't control your behavior when intoxicated, You not only ruin yourself but also drag others into a situation of confusion and sometimes serious consequences. Imagine a society where everyone behaves as if they just stepped out of a party with no safety brake, where everything could turn into a joke, from destroying public property to disrupting social order. That's why responsible drinking is extremely important. You don't always have to go all in and party till you drop. Remember that when engaging in social interactions, you're not the only one present. Those around you are part of the bigger picture, and you don't want to be the one who breaks that harmony just because of a little too much alcohol. Furthermore, this story also emphasizes the crucial role of the law in maintaining social order. Without authorities like the police, we would probably witness many beautiful sunny afternoons ruined by free performances like this one. Authorities not only need the power to deal strictly with violations, but also need to play a role in educating the community about respecting and abiding by the law. Because only when everyone realizes that there's no room for excessive adventure in society can we build a safe, civilized community where everyone respects each other and doesn't have to worry about getting caught up in unnecessary conflicts.